need a silent night and a crazy day. Monday, I took my tech Sabbath. You know, I've been inviting us to take a tech Sabbath, to turn off the electronics, and our smartphones and our TVs, and that was a hard time for me, to be honest with you. I miss listening to NPR on the radio at the end of the day. I miss watching the national news on TV. I miss watching Entertainment Tonight. I don't really watch that. I found myself uncomfortable. I wanted to pick up the remote. The Jets were playing the Miami Dolphins in Monday Night Football, and I'm usually not that interested in the Jets and the Dolphins, but the Bills are in the playoff hunt and Miami's in the playoff hunt, so I kept wanting to reach for the remote and click it on to find out what was going on. But mostly I realized how often I wanted to reach over to my smartphone when it was so quiet and entertain myself. Hey, let's check out Facebook, see what people are saying. Let's check out Twitter and see what's trending right now. Or let's just shop on the internet because, I need something to do to fill this quiet space. So I feel sorry for you, Melissa and Don, But I do know those days that you talked about. I'm so glad you find places of peace in the midst and because of your family. It was uncomfortable. And I put it down and turned it off. And I began to tune in a little bit. I noticed things and heard things that I probably don't notice. I noticed that my dog Maya was laying on the bed, and she kind of had her nose on the bed like that, and her ears popped up when she heard the geese flying over top of the house, flocks as they were going south. And I found myself thinking about Ferguson, Missouri, and the indictment or the result of the grand jury in New York City, and wondering what kind of... First, I was grateful for the faith-based people who were trying to find a peaceful, nonviolent way of addressing what injustices some people have experienced. But I also wondered, what is the pain and struggle that so many have that they move to violence and rioting and pillage in order to think they're going to have their message addressed. And I began to think about our area, our county, our community. What are race relations like in our own county? Where are the struggles? And who are we in the middle of those struggles? I heard the furnace kick on. Now, usually that's a good sign this time of year. I'm listening for the furnace to kick on to make sure it does kick on. This time I noticed it differently. I've been reading a devotional, and they were talking about probably that first night of Jesus' birth when Mary gave birth to Jesus, and it might have been a cold and chilly night, and what it must have been like for God to take human flesh and to come out of this 98.6 degree womb and be exposed to the cold realities of human life right off the bat. And how it must have felt for God as a baby to be swaddled in clothes, and for Mary to take this baby and hug it to her breasts to keep it warm. What that must have felt like that first night. Even as I fought my distractions, I discovered that when I was being mindful about the things around me, peace flooded in here and there. It didn't last because I kept looking back over at my smartphone. But when I turned back away, I discovered that peace comes when we become mindful of the gifts and graces and life that God has given all around us. Where do you find your peace? The Bible's pretty straightforward. The text in Ephesians is pretty clear. The Messiah, Jesus, has made things up between us. so that we're not now together, so that we are now together on this. He tore down the wall that we used to keep each other at a distance. Other verses of Scripture say, He is our peace. And yet, we raise so many walls. I was reminded of filter bubbles this week. I talked about that at one point in a message, but I was reminded of filter bubbles because I was checking through all the cable news channels to see how they were covering the events of Ferguson and the events of the result of the Staten Island events through the grand jury that we know about Eric Garner's death and how that came about. And I noticed that the different cable news channels covered aspects of that story in almost completely different ways. They emphasized different things from different political or social or economic points of view. And then I thought about filter bubbles. That's that notion that, when you go on the internet or use your Facebook or your Twittering, that those companies have algorithms embedded in their software that track what you like and what you don't like. But mostly they like to know what you like, because they will program and direct ads in order to sell things that you prefer. Or they will suggest websites or blogs or other places you can get information based on what you like. And the result of that is we get what we like, but do we ever get a well-rounded opinion and perspectives on a variety of issues that confront us today and that we see on the news every day? And you add to that the number of cable channels. I mean, you don't have to you can just go to one channel and get whatever you like. You can actually go on the internet now and go to the Al-Qaeda website. You might get a call from the FBI. But the internet has just exploded this. We can get what we like and not be exposed to the opinions and differences, to understand the differences between ourselves and others. It doesn't allow us to be pushed to think differently. To ask African Americans, do you hear and understand maybe some of the struggles of whiter Caucasian Americans? And for white Caucasian Americans like myself to say, do I really hear and understand the struggles and the experience of our African American brothers and sisters? And if I was honest, I would say no. Because we live in the filter bubble. And when that happens, the walls keep going up. And then came Jesus. He broke down the walls that divide us. And that is what Christmas is, well, not the only thing, but a primary focus of what Christmas is all about. God smashing down the walls, breaking down the walls, and showing us that we are all one part of God's family. And that is our hope for peace on earth. And that is our hope for goodwill towards our brothers and sisters. See, I learned a lesson Monday night as I took my tech Sabbath. That peace doesn't come to us in an age of distraction and filter bubbles. Peace grows out of being mindful and taking time and being willing to wait and focusing and paying attention on the ways of peace, on the presence of peace, on the moments of peace, on the life of Jesus, on the way of Jesus, on the gift of Jesus, on the call of Jesus. Then peace gets this foothold. Blessed are those who mourn, he said, for you shall be comforted. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall find mercy. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. You have heard it say to you, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, he said. But I tell you to love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you. A new command I give you, he said, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. When we neglect, when we devalue, when we diminish, when we assume those are second-hand intentions and desires, these teachings of Christ, then we allow the walls to go up. And we foster hostility and hatred and prejudice and bigotry. You remember the story of that silent night in World War I? They actually made a movie about it. About the German soldiers and the British and French soldiers in Christmas Eve 1914, World War I, on the battlefield of Flanders. The Germans had been in a fierce battle with the French and the British. Both sides were dug in those trenches that were 8 to 6 feet deep that stretched for miles on end. And yet all of a sudden on Christmas Eve, the Germans set trees on the top of their parapets and lit the candles on the trees. They began singing carols, and though their language was unfamiliar to their enemies 60 yards away, they recognized the tune. For a little bit, they took pot shots at the trees. But eventually they put their guns down. And instead of being belligerent, they crawled forward to listen. And after a while, the British and French enemies began to sing too. And a spontaneous truth erupted out of this experience. Soldiers left their trenches. They met in the middle to shake hands. And the first order of business they both did was to care for those who had died on the battlefield between them. And then they started to exchange gifts like chocolate cake and cognac and postcards and newspapers, tobacco. In some places in the trenches, soldiers exchanged weapons. Their rifles for soccer balls, and they began to play games. But it didn't last forever. It lasted just a night. The commanders hated what was happening and ordered them to shoot each other. And so after a while, what happened for a little while is they would shoot at each other, but they would always aim high. Because they discovered in those few sacred moments of peace that it's very hard to shoot somebody who you once thought was your enemy when you discovered in Christ that they are your brother. I love that story because it's true and because it reminds us of what happens in our hearts when we allow and prepare and be mindful of the coming of the peace of Jesus right now. I mean, what would this world be like if we pushed through the walls of our bias, of our racism, of our own opinions, of our comfort levels, and let the peace of Jesus reign in our hearts? I listened to a rabbi on a podcast this week talk about the meaning of shalom or peace in the Jewish tradition. Now, a rabbi is like a pastor for a Jewish congregation, and he talked about this word shalom. Now, of course, Jewish people don't believe that the Messiah has come like we do as Christians. They believe the Messiah, the Prince of Peace, is still coming. And he says they understand shalom. One of their understandings is this. He says, shalom or peace is the desire to act or live in a way that makes our lives worthy of the Messiah to come. To act or live in a way that makes our lives worthy of the Messiah to come. That's wild. Are we living? Are we acting? Are we being mindful in the ways we use our time and we use our gifts, we use our electronics, we use our treasure, we use our love. Are we living and acting in ways that make our lives worthy of the Messiah to come to us again today? I discovered on Monday night that the distractions were keeping me from being mindful. In my text Sabbath, that the more I stopped and became aware and focused and mindful, I became more aware of a peace. May it be